o'clock, so it's time to get started. Mark, will you call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Meter?
Here.
Commissioner Dorada?
Here.
Commissioner Roderick?
Here.
Commissioner Sternquist?
Here.
Commissioner Vincent?
Present.
Commissioner Webley?
Here.
Chairman Marson?
Here.
The ZBA, member Bone is absent. Member Prostrek?
Here.
Member Gavin is absent. Member Gibbs?
Here.
Member Comier is absent. Member Wigman is absent. Chairman Marsh?
Here.
Quorum, I do want to note, with a few ZBA members here, the quorum is for the group as a whole, potentially, so we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Mark. The next item on the agenda is approval of our minutes from March 20th. Do I have a motion to approve minutes? Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Mark, would you call the roll?
Yes. Meter?
Yes.
Dorada?
Yes.
Roderick?
Yes.
Sternquist?
Yes.
Vincent?
Yes.
Webley?
Yes.
Marson?
Yes.
Prostrek?
Yes.
Gibbs?
Yes.
Marsh?
Yes.
Approved.
Okay, the minutes are approved. Moving on is a public review meeting, kind of an informal meeting. We're continuing where we left off last month. So, Mark, you want to lead in for this, or Marissa?
Yeah, just real quick before we turn it over to Arista, I just wanted to note with a few of the members that aren't present, a couple of them have provided me some written comments. Those have been forwarded to our consultant, and I provided hard copies of these for the members here. Like the comments that we received for last month's meeting, I'll read these into the record, but for kind of the format of tonight's meeting, where we're going to kind of take things topic by topic. When there's the appropriate topic, I'll read the comment in at that time, and then if there's any other comments remaining from these at the end, I'll read those into the record at that time, just to make it clear about that.
Okay, well, thank you all for having me back. If you all don't mind, I am going to sit, just because I'm running the presentation and I'm taking notes, and likely we'll have to refer to documents as we go on. So as Mark kind of indicated, the format for this meeting is really to take some of the questions that we got from the last meeting and really go through them one by one, and in some cases we may just end up having to take a straw vote to decide how the document should be revised. We've organized this, or I've organized this by topic area. What we'll do is we're going to start with the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. So we know the traditional lot thing is a big discussion. So we'll kind of start with the easy stuff and work our way up to that, thinking we can kind of knock some of these things out. As Mark also indicated, I know we've received some comments that will kind of either fall into these different categories. Happy to stop and have a discussion as Mark reads them into the record. So we'll begin. First up is the accessory structures section. So these are the other structures on the lot aside from the principal building. We had a couple of comments here. The first was regarding dog runs, and if they should.
Could you cite the section as you're talking through these so that they can, this is a large document.
Right, so accessory structures are located in Article, we're looking at Article 1268. And so this would be in section 1268.2 regarding the specific accessory structure standards. So,
Thank you.
So the first is, should dog runs be allowed in the interior side yard? The way the current draft is done, they're allowed in the rear yard. The thought was, could they perhaps, given some of the larger lot sizes, be in that interior side yard? Mark and I have talked this over a little bit. Our idea is that it's not necessarily a bad thing to have them in a side yard, but not in the required setback. So that would be a recommendation. Obviously, this is up to the group as a whole to make a decision on this, but we think just because of the large size of what could potentially be the side yard, which again is from the building wall to the lot line, whereas that setback is that required dimension, then it may be appropriate to have a dog run within there.
I have just a little bit of a question on this one, just because, the space, my existing home is about 4 feet off of the lot line. And so, and there's a fence between my yard and the other yard, and I very often let my dog just go back there. Is that considered a dog run, or is it something more formal?
This is a structure, this is building a dog run structure.
Okay.
This isn't your dog. Your
Okay.
dog in your
Yeah,
yard is your dog in your yard. No, no, no.
There's a space that's 4 feet in between my house and
Yes,
that.
no,
And
we can't control that. Yeah, this is building a dog run structure.
Okay, that helps, thank you.
So it sounds like we're okay with that? Okay. All right. The next was a similar question regarding play structures, and should they be allowed within the interior side yard? When you look at the current draft, similar to what we just talked about with dog runs, they're allowed in the side yard if the yard is bigger than the required dimension. So the only issue here would be, if you want, say, playground equipment, swings for the kids, should they be allowed in that required interior side yard setback, or should they just be continued to be allowed, like we just talked about with the dog runs, within the side yard but not in the required setback?
I have like a lot of thoughts about this. I think like restricting the playground equipment to any part of your yard is kind of overreaching. I have like 2 of my neighbors on my street that like I met their kids and I met their family because their playground was in the front, and I think it was like really easy way to create community and meet my neighbors. Like I just feel like it, you know, there's 2 things we've talked about the last meeting. One of them was like, hey, we want to preserve this, you know, maybe nature forward look of Palos Park, and sometimes your yard is just full of trees in the specific yard's backside, whatever. And a lot of people have these like great, wonderful tree-free front yards, and it's like great for a play structure, and it's great for people walking by to meet their family. So I just don't think we should have any restrictions there personally.
Are they
I would say the only restriction you would want it far enough off the lot line so that someone else's kids aren't having to run through into the other property in order to play around it, but not that full setback of 15 feet seems excessive, you know?
Is the current, I don't think the current ordinance allows for any structure in the front of the house, is that correct?
It does not.
I have to turn to Mark on that one.
It's, again, that vague accessory structure, there are accessory structures that are allowed in the front with a maximum height of 9 feet. And I believe there is some type of setback requirement. Play equipment, play structures is not something specifically listed. So again, it's just kind of a general vague, it's an accessory structure.
One thing I've seen, some people have put trampolines in the front yard. That's not a structure, it's a play item. It's not like a basketball hoop, but you see, that kind of bothers me to have a trampoline sitting in the front yard.
Well, I feel like, okay,
And I don't know if that's covered in this.
It would be play equipment, I mean, it would be covered under that, so.
I've only lived here like 5 or 6 years, and like no one has enforced keeping a play structure in the backyard. So if it's not something we're gonna enforce, then again, like why are we writing this down? Because it just like creates the space where like they never enforced it at this house, but they're gonna enforce it at this house because someone called. I just feel like again it creates more confusion than it's helpful.
Sometimes it is just an enforcement issue where a neighbor calls, and we've seen issues, you know it's wrong, but until somebody picks up the phone, the police won't come out.
Yeah, even though they drive past it every day.
Exactly.
So
But the police aren't code enforcement. That's not their job. I'm trying to say, I'm not
it's a good
disagreeing.
point. It's a good point. I'm
That's
just
not
saying
their
that
job.
like if it's not enforced, I just feel like playthings and children create community. So like restricting them to the back of your yard so no one sees them is kind of like not what I hope to have this.
What do typically other communities do?
I mean, for the most part, what you see is they're kind of restricted to the rear yard and the side yard. That's not to say there's no kind of best practices on this, it's really kind of how you feel as a community about them. It's generally, they wanna keep these things out of the front. You know, you could have a really nice one, you could have a really one in really bad shape, you could have issues with the neighbor's kids going into your front yard to plant it. So there's something to be said on both sides. And it's the cases where you don't want the neighbor's kids coming over kind of thing. But really, it's a policy decision how you like to treat it.
I guess so it would be strange though to see like a slide and a swing set in the front yard. Is that what you're saying that
It's not
you?
that strange, it's literally two neighbors who had them in their front yards and it was fine.
Side yard, I'm okay with the side yard and rear yard, fine, but front yard,
We prohibit a lot of less kind of obstructive things in the front of homes than a big playground or a big play set. So I stand on the side at this point of side yard, rear yard, and my experience is most communities prohibit that sort of thing in the front of the house. But the idea of having a community around that's important. I wonder if it's a lot size consideration ever.
And the lot size really doesn't matter. It's really the question of regardless of the size of your lot, do you wanna see playground equipment in front of the house? I mean, the impact is kind of the same no matter how big the lot really is.
I would disagree with that a little bit. I get what everybody's saying, I would have voted just side yard and been okay with no front yard, but we have some houses on large lots that are set way back from the road, that are like, literally way back, that you can't even see the house when it's in the summertime, that who cares if they have a play set there? So to me, it's a visual thing, like, I mean, I do have a house that's set well back from the road. I don't really have a backyard, I have a side yard, and that's, my house is so far back from the road. But I probably personally, like, I did put up a zip line type thing along the very edge of my property, but I wouldn't have put a play structure there. It would be very visible directly in front of my house. But if something's like shielded by landscaping and not highly visible from the road, or not blocking the view of the actual face of the house, that wouldn't bother me, but so to me, it'd be like, it was like this structure right there in front of the house, and it blocks the view of the house. I could see that being bothersome, but then there are definite conditions where it's not a big deal, but it would be in the front yard technically, so.
I would say in something like that, kind of the compromise on that, so we can't really use a standard if, you can't see it from the street, because it's hard to enforce winter versus summer, things like that. But in the cases of these homes that are set very far back, what you can say is basically it would not be allowed within the required front setback, but it could be in the yard, because if you have a very large front yard, your house is set back more than that minimum dimension that's in there. So that is one compromise, that's one option there.
Yeah, I just feel like what is so bad about seeing kids on the playground? I don't understand the force point that it's like offensive to look at.
Well, I think it's not that it's about kids playing or that it's offensive to look at when it's new. But these things, 20 years old, they're dangerous. Kids do. I used to do this as a kid. We would, go pool hopping. So now you got kids that you might not know from the neighborhood using your thing at night, et cetera. It does present some
Well, we don't have
difficulties.
fences, they could go in your backyard too.
They
Something
shouldn't.
to be said though for uniformity. I mean, that's kind of why we're even here, to ensure a certain minimum level of uniformity in a neighborhood. I don't know that promotes uniformity if there's something in the front yard, because like, our house is set pretty far back from the street, but it's very visible, but it's still set very far back. So I don't even know if a setback is the right answer, because if we put a slide and a swing set in our front yard, it would be
It would be really weird looking. It wouldn't look right at all.
Right, and sometimes when you have kids, everything can't be perfect.
Side yard's good.
Again, like, what if you have trees in your side yard?
This house, literally right across the street from here, it's practically all front yard. If they wanted to put a swing set out in front of the house for the kids, why would that be a problem? The lot is enormous. You have unique situations, and this is too draconian, in my opinion.
That's why I asked the question about the lot size. I think there are places where it fits, but there are places where it definitely, I mean, to me, I think it would impact property values. If all of a sudden you got a small lot, there's a few of them in a row, and now there's two big, plastic, yellow, red, and green, slides in front. So if to do it, it seems like there's a standard or something like that, they can be permanent structures
So,
for sure.
I'm thinking about the city of North Chicago has some requirements for buffer yards, because I'm an architect, and they have in one of their they have allowances that at the discretion of the plan commission, this accommodation can be made, but it's at the discretion of the plan commission. So is it something that could be they would have to bring, and so we're proposing to, like, ask them for that permission, It's not necessarily I filed it as a variance request, but it's something that says, this isn't prohibited that you have to ask for, but it's something that you need to bring in front, and then we would have the discretion to say, that's okay, as opposed to like, no, I don't think that's in keeping with the, intent of, I don't know.
That's a good compromise. So like side yard, rear yard are okay,
Yes.
no permission required, but if you wanna put that in the front yard, you need permission. I like that.
We would need to look into that a little bit, because just the ability to kind of modify, you would need standards, something to evaluate this against. It kind of touches a little bit, it makes me a little nervous, it touches on things like an administrative modification or kind of a lesser variance, which is something that's not allowed unless you're home rule. So it's kind of, and the idea is I get it conceptually, it allows you to kind of look at things on a case-by-case basis, but what you may get yourselves into trouble with, it becomes subjective. It becomes that, the idea becomes, okay, well, this one's fine, but this one's not, but the guy that got turned down, why, mine's exactly like this, why are you turning me down? Or it could be somebody, there could be a perception of you just don't like me, and you're not letting me do this. So that's the danger there. So moving things so that like everything comes up for review and is decided upon is difficult. The issue of it can be in the front yard if it meets conditions X, Y, and Z, and that's clear cut, and one can look at it and say, I met this one, and this one. Okay. But they have to be clear, objective criteria to be evaluated against. And even in the plan commission case, the plan commission would need those same kind of criteria.
Will there be
You don't wanna get yourself in trouble.
Will there be a way to kind of set it up where there's a minimal amount of available land to use between the setback in the front of the house and the two side yards? I mean, if 20% of your property is in the front yard, or 30% of your property is in the front yard, then you're able to use it. I don't know how to concoct it, I haven't given it much thought. There has to be a way to create an allowable space standard. If you have this much space, then you can get it by right. If you don't, then it's a variance. Maybe you get it, maybe you don't.
And perhaps, like you said, if you can prove that your back and rear yard are not viable alternatives, you can bring this.
The question would then be what determines the backyard not being viable. I understand it's all trees, clear, not a bunch of trees, but if it's not viable because I wanted to put an outdoor kitchen and the patio and the deck back there and I don't have any more room, that's technically you self-created that issue for yourself. So that's kind of where you get, I'm trying to kind of steer towards something that's a little bit more objective rather than, kind of coming in and I think there may be something to be said for if your house is set back X amount from the streets, you can't have the equipment within the required setback, but it can be within that space between your building wall and where the setback would be, so long as you're 100 feet back. Let's use that number. That's objective. Here's my numbers, I need my numbers, I can put it there.
I honestly think this is a lot more simple than we're making.
I agree with you.
Do we want playground equipment in front yards or not?
And it's like not to stifle the brainstorming that's going on, but I think it's getting too granular. And then I at least read the code like defensively of thinking how are people gonna misunderstand the code, and like the more subsections and like tiny details in this but not that you get into more murky waters, it's conceptually sometimes you have to like step back a little.
I think we have to be extremely careful in opening up the front yard to play sets, and I'm just thinking about the sheer numbers in the village, and what would happen if 500 residential lots decided to all build a play set in the front yard? And with a play set in children, it's such a short period of time that they're utilizing that, and after a while it just sits and it becomes old, decrepit, not kept up, and unfortunately, if you do have a few village residents or some households that they don't have room in the back or the side, I'm sorry. We have, public parks and we have libraries and other things to do, and it's just not gonna work out for their lot. So I would be against opening up front yard lots in Gates Park for any type of play sets and things like that.
Do we want to take a straw vote on whether or not to allow them in the front? And then if the vote is yes, then we can continue to discuss it. Okay. Wait, I have something fun for you guys. So we use these in other zoning meetings. So you get to vote, but this way you don't have to raise your hands and you don't have to count. These are, and you can keep it. We have a lot of these. We have a lot of meetings. A lot of decisions. Sorry. Sorry, Mark doesn't get one. And also it's easier to count because I can see red versus green.
Can we use this with our kids?
You can take it home if you want to. That's actually, we've had that a lot, and parents just leave with them. So we just decided to divide them all in half.
Hey, you just gave me this.
Yes, these are all yours. So the straw vote, do we want to allow playgrounds in the front yard, play structures in the front yard? Red is no, green is yes. Okay, I don't think we're allowing.
I would have liked where you're allowing an overhang or something that's allowed to extend into the setback. I think they should be allowed to extend into the setback a certain amount, just like a chimney or something like that.
The equipment or the playground
Yes,
stuff?
or just a certain amount that it can extend into the setback. There's items that we have that like a balcony is allowed to
Yeah.
extend. That would be my only comment.
Okay, the next one I think I might know the answer.
So before we move on to the solar and wind, do you have any other accessory structure topics to talk about?
We're still on accessory structures. There's
There-
another
I mean,
slide.
I'm just saying, there's more, okay.
No, there's actually two more slides. You guys really
Okay.
dug into accessory structures. Okay. All right. So next was the freestanding private solar and private wind structures. Currently, the way it's drafted, solar is allowed to be 20 feet in height to a maximum in the rear yard only. A freestanding wind turbine is allowed to be 35 feet max in the rear yard only. The issue was, do we want to prohibit these freestanding structures in the rear yard?
If I may, so I'll real quick just read comment submitted from Teresa Gavin regarding solar and wind turbines. Solar panels, 20-foot max height. For freestanding solar is very tall. There should be a limit as to how many freestanding structures can be located in a rear yard. Regarding wind turbines, 15-foot max height mounted on a structure. So this may be more about mounting on a structure, but it's related. What seems to create an eyesore, consideration should be given for the supporting pole of the wind turbine to be neutral color and non-reflective. Sightlines should also be considered. If not used for a certain period of time, place time limit as to when structures should be removed. I believe that is all the written comments I have related to that.
do we want to allow freestanding wind and solar at all, basically at all?
Freestanding, so that means
It's a pole.
ground mounted.
Yes.
I read this very closely. So there's ground mounted and there's roof mounted.
Yes.
So we're only voting on ground mounted.
Right now, it's only
Fine.
poles in the backyard.
Okay.
Freestanding ground mounted.
I think there should be, I think there's definitely gonna be use cases where, ground mounted solar or wind in remote corners of the property that would, not at the home, would A, be more aesthetically pleasing, and B, offer more energy efficiency from those sources. So to completely eliminate, I think, is a bad idea, but I think we should have 20 feet in the air for a solar panel. Yeah, I think it should be 6 foot or 5 foot. If you've got the solar exposure, jack it up any higher, is it gonna clear a big oak tree or something? 20 feet's not gonna clear a red or white oak or anything like that. We wouldn't want anything any higher than that, so I think we should bring it down. It should be a 6 foot maximum or something that we can give the technical recommendation. Under 20 feet is way too tall.
Yeah, my reaction to 20 foot was I would want to move out. My neighbor did that, and I wouldn't be able to sell my house. The other comment, so I was thinking like 5 feet, similar lines. But the only concern I have is that when you do, instead of ballasted, you do the vertical, the ones up on people's roofs. There's a significant amount of wind uplift, design you have to do into the structure, which I assume you would also have to do in a backyard. And I do have a concern that somebody that's just doing something in their backyard is not necessarily going to do that, and it can become a flying projectile. Not a huge concern to me. I would be okay with 5 feet. Zero chance I'm interested in anything more than that.
I'm a structural engineer, I think they have to be permitted anyway, so they have to be signed off on, am I correct in it?
Oh, yes, we would get them.
Okay.
So, I would never put it on my own roof personally, I've heard too many people have had issues with it. Company puts it on and, oh, your roof's leaking, it's your problem, no thanks.
How feasible is ground mounted solar in this community? Does anybody really know it at 5 feet? I mean, like, I have an acre. The only place I'd be able to put something big enough to power my home, as far as I know, would be in the front of my house. And it would have to be about 20 feet by 20 feet. So, like, what properties can even accommodate this here? So, it seems like there's a lot on this one, but I'm sorry.
Grandparents next door.
Yeah. Like a 5 acre lot or a 1 acre? Okay.
5.
So that's, yeah, like, I think that's an important part of this mix here. This is like, how big of a lot can actually sustain this? Let's permit it for a lot that sustains it. Let's have the solar, we'll look at the Solar Industry Association's website and figure out, how much land do you need to really be meaningfully powering your home? And then let's permit for that. But like, a half acre lot that a guy thinks he can stick in a 5x5 solar panel 10 feet off the ground seems to be an eyesore and not really effective for that homeowner's home. So I like the idea of a 3 acre, 5 acre, minimum to have ground mounted structures, for sure. I don't care about the rooftops. Anybody wants that on a rooftop, they can have it on a rooftop as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so there's a couple things here regarding the freestanding solar. The first is whether or not to allow it. It sounds like there may be some support to allow it, but bringing that height down significantly to something like 5 feet. I was thinking 6 feet, just kind of thinking about, a mounting structure and then the panel itself. Again, this is all just in the rear yard, it's the only place it can go. And then there seemed to be another concern that it should be limited to a lot size. I think the practicalities of it from a zoning perspective is we're just allowing this form of alternative energy to happen. The idea is most people won't do it unless it's financially feasible to install it and get a break. So it kind of regulates itself in terms of who's putting it in there, because you're not gonna pay thousands and thousands of dollars to put something in that you get nothing out of. I mean,
Something like 20%, and I don't hold me to that statistic, but something around there is a DIY for ground-mounted solar in this country. So, like, are we gonna allow some guy to do a DIY project in his backyard here?
My neighbor has 3 of these already. Ground-mounted solar panel on a pole, designed for point of use. It's not designed to return energy back to the grid or power the home. It's designed to power accessory structures out at different points in his property. So, what do we define as a solar panel? This panel's only this big. It sits on a pole, and so
That's my point. It's way more complicated than just.
yeah, this
than
is
just
a $900 product on Amazon that can power three cameras with satellite cards in them, endlessly. So
yeah, would that be considered a solar installation? It's really
Yes.
a camera installation.
no, it is. I mean, the solar panels are there, yeah. It would be considered a solar panel, which is why the ordinance looks to make provisions for that.
I was a project manager for the Water Reclamation District. We did one of the commissioners wants to get us to net zero energy by 2035. And one of the components that our consultant came up with was solar panels. But an issue that came up, because people are talking about the height, if you've got them mounted, you want to be able to get underneath them to mold. So I have to say it'd be a minimum 8 foot, because if you have it and it's 4 foot, you got all kinds of limitation going with it. And it depends on where it's at. I mean, perhaps they didn't want to know it. I have 2/3 of an acre, and I really don't need a lawnmower because mine's all still natural. But if you have a manicured lawn in your backyard and you have that, you want to be able to access it. So if you limit it to 6 height, it just complicates it. 20 feet, I think, is excessive, but 6, I think, is
we find some standards from some of the industry leaders that make these products and see what they're doing.
We can look into it. You're gonna get stuff from all over the places they compete with each other. So, I mean, I think really the one thing is we've looked at other ordinances. A lot of places that want to facilitate this type of stuff, different communities. The 20 foot hasn't really been an issue. They didn't really go to 20 feet. If we want to start smaller, I didn't see the photo. I would assume they don't exceed 8 feet from where they are.
It's just a pole mounted system.
Yeah.
It can be at any height, whatever height your pole is at. This kit mounts to. And this is just one example. It's an Amazon product. This is something I know my neighbors using this exact product. It's $900.
I have a question for you. I think at the last meeting, if I'm recalling correctly, you said that most communities fully restricted freestanding solar panels. Is that correct?
Communities like Palos Park.
But like
There's other bigger, there's bigger communities that have at it.
as in you have 0. Like, is that?
It's not 0. There are other communities that allow for freestanding solar up to 15, 20 feet in their rear yard.
And then are there communities that fully restrict it?
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess the first question would be, do we want to allow it before we change the standard, do we want to allow it in the rear yard?
In some form, maybe.
In some form. If we want to allow it, we just need to determine the standards. Okay, so we're gonna allow in the rear yard 20 feet way too high. It sounds like 8 feet, just based on and I can look this up a little bit more. 8 feet is too high.
Yeah, 8 feet seems fine. 5 feet seems fine. You can put gravel underneath it. I mean, there's definitely there's ways to minimize the need to mow underneath there.
Do you want to take a vote on 8 feet and then on 5 feet? Kind of the easiest way to do these. All right. So solar ground mounted, allow it at 8 feet. Okay, the greens have it. This isn't your last shot at the apple. You're going to fight at the apple also. This is just to get us to the next draft. So I'm going to say, just based on this conversation, the second one was the freestanding wind structure. Those have to be higher because they have to get above everything to catch the wind. If we do not like 20-foot solar, we don't want 35-foot. Just do the red. Just everybody, I know is going to come to it. The freestanding wind towers in the rear yard. Nobody wants a 35-foot tower. Yeah, okay. There's one green. Okay. Alright,
Now, my house had a window, literally had a window, right? That was a long time ago.
Can I ask you a question? What's the maximum height you can have something on your roof? You know, like a pole or something along those lines? Do you want to put a flagpole or some sort of antenna? Is there a height limit?
it varies, so you would have to go
Yeah,
into
yeah.
structure standards, depending on what you're building, when you're looking at something
I
like,
know like a ham radio antenna has some sort of,
yeah, maximum, and ham radio, because they're protected. Federally, so they're allowed up to 40 feet, if they wanna go higher, they have to get a special use approved, they need the additional height. That would be the other one that's on there for solar, we allow in buildings that are over 40 feet in height, which would not be your single family. 15 feet on top of a flat roof for a solar panel, maximum 6 feet, unless if you're not mounted flat, if you had a flat roof, maximum 6 feet if your building's 40 feet or under. And so that's not applicable to residential, that would be applicable only to commercial. Wind turbines, currently, mounting a turbine upon a structure, which would be either your house or your accessory structure, currently that's 15 feet above the height. Okay. So next it was just a comment regarding the pool house, and went back and looked at it, and within.
Sorry, did we vote on turbines mounted on the roof?
That hadn't come up, but we can discuss it, we were talking about ground mounted turbines.
Just ground mounted, because I'd like to talk about the roof mounted turbines
No,
too.
of course.
Because the way it's drafted, you can mount something on your roof that's 15 feet higher than your roof line.
Correct, that's the way the turbine language is drafted now.
So like, to me, that's an eyesore. You have this thing that's sticking up 15 feet, and that could be on a home, but it also could be on a business, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you drive by Francesca's or Shrimp House, and they could put legally something that's 15 feet higher that's spinning on their roof.
Currently, that is how it's drafted.
Like, I don't think that's what we want, is it? Visually, aesthetically?
So essentially, you don't want to allow wind turbines.
Don't what?
You don't want to allow wind turbines, whether on a roof or ground mounted. That essentially would just take them out.
Aesthetics
No,
matters.
aesthetics
Matters. That's
Aesthet-
why we're
aesthetics
even
do
here.
matter. No, I agree, aesthetics do matter, and I wonder if it's type of wind structure that might be allowable. You know, there's some with, you know, we all think of these ones with these big gigantic blades on the front. But
These are
there's,
significantly smaller.
These are-
Oh, Jesus.
that's the point I'm trying to make, so.
Yeah, these are not, no, this is not the giant thing that you see as you drive along, you know, the highway and you see them out there. They can't physically support that kind of load. There's much smaller structures, a lot of them are designed. You'll see there's a bunch in Chicago, you'll see a bunch of buildings that have got kind of all kinds, because they can be the ones that turn this way, they can also turn this way. So they've got kind of design to them for the most part. We're not the most ideal wind climate here. I know that sounds crazy considering everything that's happened, but for the purposes of these, the consistency within, you know, and particularly here, you have a lot of trees, so you're not going to get that wind that you need. But these are smaller. I mean, we allow up to 15 feet, but there needs to be that protection from the blade. The blades have to clear the roof, whether you're going this way.
I think that in a community where you have a lot of buildings that are significantly taller than the buildings that we have in our community, that might make sense to have something where that you could put it on a roof, and from the street you're maybe not even going to see it with the angle, but that's not the character of our community. We don't have too many two-story buildings even, you know, so anything you put that's 15 feet up is like the height of a house on top of something, and you're gonna see it. So I don't wanna not support wind and solar, but at the same rate, like, I think with the nature of the community, like, I don't know that,
Well, there's like houses that are bigger than 2 stories.
Yeah.
I mean, what if you just have a max height relative to the ground? Because like, there are houses that are higher than 2 stories.
they care about alternative energy, they can put solar panels on the roof. We're not saying, we're
I
not,
don't think you're an engineer who can assess that, like, I just, you're like putting so many restrictions because of.
aesthetics. I don't have to be an engineer to know aesthetics.
Okay, I live next to an abandoned house, and guess what? My property value did not decrease in the last 10 years. And the house has been abandoned for 10 years.
It's not really a.
Is that not an eyesore? Is a lawn not really an eyesore? Is that what we're talking about? A roof falling in,
It is
Is
a-
that-
that's an eyesore, right? But guess what? It didn't matter. My property taxes still went up. So like, I feel like you guys are being a little picky. It's like these are real world people with not millions of dollars sometimes to make their houses perfect.
They're not gonna be able to afford expensive wood structures and solar panels for their home, and to that
Certainly
logic.
not this year.
Well, we just said we didn't want ground mounted wind turbines, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if we don't want the ground mounted, and we know that to put that same structure on the roof, it's gonna be 15 feet in the air, or could be, why would we say yes to roof mounted if we said no to ground mounted? I mean, people still have the option of solar panels. And no, I'm not an engineer, but I can still say that that's a valid alternative, generally speaking.
Mark, how many folks have come in to ask for solar panels?
Solar, a few, we regularly permit those. I don't believe we've had any wind.
Residential wind is like so minimal. It doesn't seem to even be something that people are going to ask for, so it just seems to me to be something that we can easily restrict in this ordinance, and it's not gonna really impact anybody's desires. They can always try to get a
I was
variance
just
for it.
gonna say that we have come to a conclusion that it's not good things that you can always ask for variance.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be a variance, but I wasn't at, because the better way to handle it in the future, say we adopt whatever code here and we're hypothetically not allowing it, you know, at a certain point, we can come in for, you know, to consider a text amendment to revisit this as well, so.
It could also be something that's a special use. You know, if you're gonna do this, then you have to come before the plan commission, and it has to go through that aesthetic review, and so that people aren't, and it does then get neighbor input.
I would be okay with the school asking to put it up.
100%, 100%, absolutely.
So you can make a distinction of residential versus non-residential, because it seems the major crux here is a lot of it, not all of it, is the residential. You can limit it to, you could say roof mounted is allowed for, and keep in mind, all of your commercial is done by PUD, you don't need the special use. So if we say that roof mounted wind turbines are allowed for non-residential uses, which would be commercial uses or schools, you know, they're coming through on a PUD case anyway, for you to evaluate.
I would say like some of the existing commercial or not approved through a PUD.
Oh, okay, so there's this stuff that's like.
I wouldn't want that either. Of school, I'd be okay with the school, but I wouldn't be okay saying, hey, Shrimp House, Francesca's, Jewel, have at it. Like, that's not, again, the aesthetics that we're looking for.
Krista, could we consider allowing it in the institutional and open space zoning districts only?
I would say for the most part to allow it just in the institutional. The open space doesn't really have much that you would roof mount a turbine on. But you could allow it for the institutional, which would be any kind of, you know, schools, government facilities that are all within the institutional district.
I would support allowing them ground mounted as well. Just if they need, you know, because that may be something that's more feasible for them, and that's the sort of thing that in that specific use, I would be okay with 20 feet. But,
An institutional district.
yeah.
Solar farm,
That's fine.
school or something, yeah. Or a wind farm.
So we want to allow them for, so it sounds like the compromise here is allowing them for, in the institutional district for the institutional uses. And that sounds like ground and roof?
Sure. For institution.
Okay. still an accessory structure, it's got one more slide to go on
I
this one.
thought this was the low hanging fruit.
I thought so too. I thought so too. I didn't think I was gonna need to pull out the paddle, but I did. So a couple of things. One is just a clarification. Somebody had mentioned a comment about making sure that a pool house allows a shower. Looking back in the current draft code, per the definition of pool house, it does say showers and bathrooms. So there's nothing really to vote on. Just wanted to bring to the attention that it does talk about showers and bathrooms. One question that came up, you'll see this is why it's in blue with asterisk, is in talking to Mark, there are these issues of combinations of detached structures. So you have a detached structure and you start to combine a garage with a pool house. Do we want to allow for that to happen, or if you're doing such things, should they be two separate structures?
Why do we care? Hello?
It can be difficult to kind of manage. Is it really a garage or is it really a pool house? That kind of issue is more of an interpretation
I'm
issue.
not teasing, why do we care? Seriously.
Mark, why do we care?
I note this because I think
I'm not
the
being funny.
issue is that we have garages where we're allowing a bathroom only. Detached garages we're allowing a little kitchenette. You put them together, now you have both, and that could potentially be used as an accessory dwelling unit, which I know we don't allow, but then you're, doing code enforcement afterwards. So to kind of the point Kristen made earlier, it's sort of that folks trying to find the loophole, if you will. So was my concern, because as drafted, okay, we're allowing the detached garage to have the pool house to have the bathroom, but then there's these other sort of accessory building type things, like a pool house that may have the kitchenette. Well, my point is it could complicate some of these regulations. And we have had folks who are looking into doing these sorts of things and trying to find loopholes actively is happening. Again, I just wanted to throw out there, again, to that point, maybe we don't care, but I just want to make sure if we don't care that we collectively don't care, and have that conversation.
So I don't know that we don't care, I didn't understand.
Sure.
The issue.
Can I just say something about this? My field is custom integration, audio, video, and high-end residential. Spent a lot of time in Hinsdale, Winnetka, Northbrook, high-end areas. This is super, super common. Where there's a detached garage, single-car garage, room above it, there's a pool right on it, everything's crammed on, there's a small skinny lot. Extremely common. I mean, almost in every nice home that we're in, you've got a detached garage with a room above it. There's a little kitchenette that opens up to a pool, and it's all in one structure. I would definitely thumbs up keeping that, going that route, unless anyone's got major objection to that.
I think if we're only allowing people to have a certain, like two accessory structures, but then you're forcing them to separate them into two different things, then you've I don't think that's fair. But I can see where maybe there is something that would limit, like if you're going to combine these two uses, you don't get to have this, so that it doesn't become a living, like a dwelling unit. I don't know.
Well, again, to be clear, the draft isn't allowing the accessory dwelling unit, but again, they come in for a permit for, here's a garage and pool house, but they build it, and then grandma ends up living there anyways, and how do we catch that? I guess more difficult after the fact.
Well, I don't understand why we care about that, and educate. I'm not being difficult.
Again, I'm not saying, from a policy perspective, the village doesn't allow
Why do we care?
accessory dwelling units, and, if the group wants to allow them, let's allow them, but again, that's right now, and I don't think I think comments last month were against accessory dwelling units, so.
I think because living there is a benign example. It's not grandma we're worried about. It's like unrelated people
Correct.
living in a
It
multi-family.
says immediate family in the guest
It-
group.
But I'm saying in practice, if you don't regulate the separation of these two structures, people will use this in practice.
And it'll be easy for them to have 5 unrelated
more than 5 unrelated persons living on the property because they use that accessory dwelling unit or accessory building as a dwelling unit. And I'll tell you from experience, because where I live, there is one of these on my street. There's traffic, there's cars parked on the side of the road all the time. The driveway has 12 cars in it, 12.
Really?
And lots of garbage all the time, there's people hanging out on the street, it's a pain. And that's what you start to allow more and more if we didn't talk about this.
But do we allow that now? I mean, do we
You
allow?
don't allow that now.
It becomes an enforcement issue though, because then it's harder to deal
Yes.
with after the fact. Even though it's against the code, it's then a problem. Then it needs to involve law enforcement or evictions or trespassing or whatever it may be, and then that ends up a giant headache.
I'm taking someone to adjudication, we need to prove that there are unrelated
Yes.
people living in that, and sleeping, you know, in that accessory building, that gets a lot more difficult to prove. You know, my code enforcement officer, you know, isn't gonna get a warrant to, you know, stake out and, you know,
Right.
go there at 10 o'clock at night to see what's going on, so, from the enforcement standpoint.
I'm gonna rely on Mark's expertise in this area, and I have to agree with Mark. If he foresees an issue with this in the future, then I have to agree with Mark and say he knows better than probably anyone in this room about, you know, some of the potential problems that can happen, so, it's something that we can revisit in the future if we have to, just like a lot of these things. If we have to do a text amendment to the code, then we do that. I think if he foresees a problem, that problem is probably imminent, so.
So as it stands now, to be clear, as long as they're separated, we can do certain things, but if you stick them together, you can't, correct?
To clarify, what we allow
Currently, the
now.
code, the draft doesn't speak to anything.
Yeah.
This would be
I'm
clear. The draft doesn't speak to this situation right now. This is a clarification we're requesting, policy opinion on.
Mark, what about the guest room clause that they added? I believe it's,
1266.
yes.
And actually, here I'll note, it's in 1266, not 1268, because it's under accessory uses, not accessory structures. But I do have comments about that, so I'll go ahead and read that. From Teresa, accessory use standards, accessory office, studio, guest room, discussed at last meeting and would consider eliminating this accessory use. Foresee this use is causing a lot of problems, especially as a guest use. And additionally, another comment from Vanetta, we cannot allow an accessory structure to be used as a office/studio or guest room to be used by the occupant of the dwelling unit or other guests. No way, this is not an accessory structure, it's another dwelling. Point C says that the accessory structure can be used as a home occupation. Now we're getting home occupation. Does this include the 5 extra people allowed in the residence as stated under the definition of family? This family involves 5 unrelated people living in the dwelling unit. All of this needs to be revised. So I did have some written comment here with some concern about the accessory guest room provisions, which you just brought up as well.
You know, if you knew that people wouldn't take advantage, you'd like to let them do what they want to do with their property. But I live right down the street from a house that takes total advantage of the fact that it's hard to enforce the code. You know, how do you walk into a place and say, you think there's more than 5 unrelated people living here? Well, why do you think that? And like the burden of proof is on us or you guys, I guess, right? Because I would like to say, go ahead and do what you want to do with your accessory unit or building. But it's gonna be taken advantage of. And you're gonna have lots of cars spilling out into the roadway, people hanging out all hours. They have like 3 garbage cans every single week full of garbage with the lids up. I mean, you know there's more than 5 people living there. You just know. But
If we live in the same area, I know what house you're talking about, which is why I'm so confused.
So there's kind of 2 questions here. The first is the garage and the pool house, which don't seem, as individual uses don't seem to be an issue. The question here on this one specifically, before we jump to the next one, is do we want to allow them to be combined in a single structure? And the question here on this one specifically, before we jump to the next one, is do we want to allow them to be combined in a single structure?
I think we should.
Okay.
I think we should.
So, there's 2 questions here. The first is the garage and the pool house, which don't seem, as individual uses don't seem to be an issue. The question here on this one specifically, before we jump to the next one, is do we want to allow them to be combined in a single structure? Everybody knows what I'm gonna say next. Hands up?
Can I just get clarification on one?
Sure.
Can you have a pool house if you don't have a pool? Like, is that a thing?
It's a great question.
I suppose, I mean, but the thing is that it's defined as a structure that supports the use of a pool on a property.
Right, so if you didn't have a pool, then you wouldn't get permitted to have a pool house garage. I feel like it kind of narrows the houses that might even be permitted to have a pool.
That's fair enough.
It's fair point.
You cannot build a pool house in planning for a pool. Right, you have to have the pool.
Permit altogether.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me the distinction again, if you put them together, what change does that make?
Who else gets a bath? A bathroom, garage, but I'm not sure we can.
And it's really the kind of, the garage that's really being a garage and becomes something much bigger because they're combined in one structure.
Who else can have a full bath garage? So,
Yeah, I mean, that's really it. And then once it's got a bathroom and it's all connected, then the car sometimes doesn't go in there anymore. And it's not really used as a detached garage. That's the issue. You could not care about it. I have a ton of neighbors. None of them use their garage to park their car. It's stored with every child's item that they've collected over the past 40 years in boxes. But you know, that is the issue on the table. Let's take a vote. Do we want to allow for the combination of a pool house and a garage?
I'm in the middle of it.
No, we cannot. No. We gotta just go 1, 2, 3.
You gotta have it.
Whichever instance you have. So we've got.
I was abstaining.
2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. The nose, I think, eked it out.
That's too close.
1, 2, yeah, I think
So we don't really care.
It's a straw vote.
Again, this is all for the next draft. These are items as you look at revisions, you can reconsider. This is at the end of the day. So the other issue that came up per the comments that Mark read was this issue of the accessory office, studio, or guest room that we've got in the current code. You can vote if you want right now, I'm fine with that. And really what this is really to allow for, you know, somebody to have, you may have somebody that uses an accessory structure to have a studio. Or it's the way it's written now, a guest room for a family member. Do you want to allow this? And the way that it is currently put together, obviously it's just within, the residential districts. Clearly, it's related to the residential.
Is a sauna considered an accessory structure under this? I know it's an accessory structure, but like a freestanding sauna.
Like out in your backyard? Yeah, I mean, we haven't called it out specifically, but it would just be subject, because, so there's a set of general standards for accessory structures, which basically, kind of, if you look at them, they're really all in the rear, they would be in the rear yard. I will fight about a sauna in the front yard, we're not doing that. And then if it doesn't follow one of these specific, because we've listed out some specifically, because they have some specific standards tied to them. For a sauna, it would just be an accessory structure in your backyard and be subject to the general standards. And just because I know the question.
The accessory, for the, like, comments about, office, studio, guest room, and accessory building, which the current code does allow. Yes, but it, Joe had brought it up, and so I kind of read the comments.
So do we want to continue to allow this? Yes.
Can you repeat what we're voting on?
The accessory office / studio or guest room, which is basically kind of office space, studio space in a detached accessory structure, or it could be a guest room for a family member.
With a bathroom.
It doesn't, it only allows for, basically a sink and a toilet, and a shower. And basically, we wrote the standards, let me pull those up right away. A full kitchen is prohibited, only a kitchenette with a sink, microwave, or refrigerator. Full bath is prohibited, only half bath allowed. and sink only.
Why would you, it can't be a guest room without having a bathroom.
But it's a toilet and a sink.
No sink, no shower.
I mean, the intent is it's not intended to be a dwelling unit.
This would be an accessory structure, not designed to be an accessory dwelling unit.
This is inside, you have a bed in there that somebody, you have a guest, they come, they stay, they wash their hands, they use the bathroom, and they leave.
That's not, I'm confused. I thought we were talking about accessory structures.
Well, it's an accessory use, but it got dragged into this because the conversation came in, so we had to kind of discuss this one here at this point. Since it was brought up on the comments that we received from those that weren't attending.
So is this a separate building or not?
Yes.
It's a detached accessory structure that's used as an office or studio, can also be used as a guest room.
But not a permanent residence?
No, it is not a dwelling unit.
With the restriction that it's a half bath only.
Half bath and kitchenette.
Kitchenette means no oven.
It specifically states sink, microwave, and refrigerator. That's it.
So our guests have to pitter patter across the walkway to come and take a shower? Is that it?
Yes. I mean, that's the intent. The intent is it's not a dwelling unit, that is,
You wouldn't want to do that.
It's the same reasoning as the previous thing we just voted on with the two different buildings for the garage and the pool houses, because people will use and abuse it. If you throw a showers.
are we okay with keeping this use?
Yeah.
Settled it up? Alright, one no, where it stays. Okay. Alright, next up is, again, a question that in discussions with staff, we realized wasn't addressed, and if there's anything we want to address in here, the concept of pole barns as an accessory structure. And understanding kind of how it might look on a lot. Currently, they would be subject just to the general standards, kind of that I was talking about with the sauna, there's some general standards, so basically to the rear, there's a height limitation. Obviously, there's some subject to the coverage stuff. Three approaches continue to treat them as that. Just if you want to put one up, you're subject to the general standards. Create some specific controls for this. We would define it as a separate use and create controls on this, how tall it can be, where it can locate. Potentially that you need a certain amount of minimum lot area to have a pole barn. And then the third approach, the most aggressive, is just to outright prohibit them. And so we turn this to the group knowing that, now this is new, so we're trying to determine the approach to this. This isn't in the current, technically in the way the current draft is written, it would just be treated as a general accessory structure and subject to those standards.
So it would have control.
There's controls like any other accessory structure, which is basically to the rear of the lot, some size limitations, all that. That would apply to anything that's not covered specifically.
Building materials as well?
Well, there's no current building material restrictions on accessory structures, because they can be made of so much. That's the main issue with the pole barn, that's kind of what defines it, is what it's made out of.
I think you have to have some sort of guidelines for
Yes.
building materials. I mean, pole barns can be attractive, but most of them aren't. But I wouldn't necessarily rule them out as long as they wouldn't be attractive. I mean, you don't have to build them ugly.
See, that's the trick, we can't say pretty ones are good. It would be lovely if we could, but you know. I mean, that's the issue, and the issue is when you say pole barn, it is, the intent there is that they've got it, you know, there are fancy ones, but the majority of them are a certain look. And it's because of the building materials they're made of, you can just kind of stick them up in your rear yard.
You don't want that.
So we have opinions on this.
I would not want them unless there's some restrictions on building materials, how construction, all that, the general standards plus some guidelines on at least exterior, materials.
Well, what exterior materials?
I don't know.
So,
Not ugly,
like,
not metal,
aluminum side
not metal.
versus-
Well, I mean, that's
I
the,
don't know what the difference
because
is.
then at that point, we kind of talk about a barn, and then that's just an accessory structure. The pole barn, the issue of the pole barn is made out of metal.
Well, we're Chris, if I may, I mean, having been the one that brought this up, I brought up pole barn, but to a certain degree, it is in a way a conversation just about larger accessory buildings, period, to a degree as well. Maybe I could be clear about that, I know I use the term pole barn, which, yes, metal and maybe don't look as good, but then, what I'm kind of saying is we also need to make sure that, you know, if we're gonna prohibit them or have specific controls, that we make sure we define what's a detached garage, what's a pole barn, et cetera, just make sure these things are properly defined and clear, so that we're all on the same page. If somebody's not, a year from now, building a large structure in their backyard, and like, oh, I thought we didn't allow pole barns. Well, it's not a pole barn, it's a detached garage. You know, pole barns have these overhead doors, you know, so.
So we actually, within the last year, approved someone who came to that commission with a pole barn structure. We didn't have the ability to say, no, you can't do a pole barn because we don't like that type of building. I personally, as an architect, like, they turn to garbage fairly, like, the metal siding turns to garbage pretty quickly. And people don't, it's an investment, significant investment to change that. But I don't have any ability to say, I don't like the type of, you know, like material that you're using on this, therefore no. And we, you know, it was about, the number of, accessory buildings on our lot that we were talking about, that someone came with one of these and we approved it. I'm with you of it, Phil, on that. For me, I have a problem with allowing people to build metal, like just pure metal structures without some kind of like, there should be some, I don't care about, it's not so much like I want my aesthetic on you, so much as building a preformed metal building. In my opinion, they rust and they rot and they, that's my concern, honest. I don't know that I'm against it completely so much as some kind of control. And you are allowed, if it's a general accessory structure, you're allowed up to like the height of the in your back, where I would build my garage, I could build a pole barn. Like, and I don't know that I want that.
We do allow it, and I think it's tied into horses.
Yeah.
And this is more of an agricultural building, and you would have to limit the size lot. You're not gonna do it on a half-acre lot. I don't even believe, maybe an acre lot, but I know it might have to be even larger for the pole barn. But typically, if you have a horse, you want a pole barn.
So the three options are, number one, don't allow them. And we can define pole barn, I mean, really, we're looking at, like you said, this prefab metal building that you just get and you put up. That's how the definition would read. Prohibit them. Just treat them as they are now per the draft, which they would just be another general type of accessory structure. So they would be subject to those general limitations on height, location. Or we can define it, create specific controls, say they can be this tall, they have to be in the rear yard, they have to be on a lot of X amount of size. You know, you can put whatever controls you'd like. So keep them general, control them, prohibit them.
Just to throw out there, it's in a completely different section of our code, it's not a zoning regulation, it's stuff with animals, you have to have a half acre to have horses and cows currently.
I think I'd be in favor of not having it at all. And if somebody has a great idea, bring it forward. But until then, I'd say no.
What are you gonna do about the center?
It's already built.
Well,
Then we want more.
so that's gonna tie into a question that's, it's not coming up next, it's coming up soon. Regarding those uses, basically 9 acres in the center, which are more agricultural based, to deal with the clarification we need to make, because they're really not accounted for in the ordinance. We would make a use for them. Your other option is, which is option 4, if we bring in this use to cover those two guys, we can have them be the only ones allowed to have it, because it's part of kind of almost an ag operation. That is a kind of 4th option to deal with those.
Because I was reading this in a residential context, not in a.
Yeah. Well, right now we don't have anything that talks about those types of uses, those two farms. We're gonna call them farms. I know they're not just farms. They've got a lot of stuff going on in there as well, but we'll just call them the 2 farms, just to keep it simple. We don't have anything that addresses that. That's gonna come up as a question regarding how we can address them, which we think we found a solution to that. If the issue is that we want to allow them to do it, which is kind of more typical to an ag operation, we can make that allowance, and basically only agricultural uses only these farm uses can have this pole barn. That is kind of a 4th option. Confused yet?
I'm not sure if we have the proper, or we're not seeing the proper definition of a pole barn versus a garage. I think that's the confusing part. You know, what defines a pole barn different than a garage? So if we prohibited them, then why wouldn't a person just build the same size structure, only call it a garage versus a pole barn, just do a different construction technique?
The application that we had last time, they were using it for storage of, like, equipment, lawnmower, large, yeah.
Is the material specification for garages, but not for accessory structures? Like if you called it a garage, then would you have to apply the material essentially?
I guess my, I'd be okay with 2 personally.
Yeah.
I have concerns with preformed metal buildings in general, with the way that they deteriorate and do not get replaced.
I mean, that's the other simple option is to say prefab metal buildings are prohibited, or not even define pole barns. I'll just keep adding in the numbers. I mean, if it's the building material, we can prohibit the building material for accessory structures.
It's not like a greenhouse, because sometimes that's prefab.
But it wouldn't be metal. The whole building, the siding wouldn't be metal. I mean, it'd have metal supports, but
Okay, I'm just
essentially
making
it's
sure
a
that's
greenhouse,
not-
I would assume it needs the light to come in.
Certain
Yeah,
sheds,
utility
considered
sheds,
prefab,
Or which?
certain types of sheds be considered prefab.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could. Yeah, there may be some that are metal.
I mean, it
But
could be
you could potentially
prefab
put it
metal buildings
the size.
larger than a shed size, larger than 10.
Yeah, I mean, that is the issue with pole barns is they're huge. If you have if it's, prefab metal buildings are limited to 144 square feet or less. Are we good with that?
If you put a prefab metal building up and put siding that covers the exterior siding on between the girts, how would you even be able to tell?
You wouldn't even be able to tell unless your neighbors told them.
And they
No, you wouldn't be
Yeah,
able
well,
to,
if
from
we're
looking
moving
at it, you wouldn't know.
Right,
Yeah,
and
so
I
it's
guess
just-
that would address my concern that you're
It's
covering up the
aesthetic
part that's
concern.
but you're covering up the part that's gonna rust, you're protecting it from the elements, I guess.
But the way that you write the standard is that it's used as the prefab metal is used as the exterior siding.
Yeah.
If I went and put something else on top of it, I'm now not part of this control.
It's still a prefab metal building.
Well, we're not,
You're worried about exposed steel exterior siding is what you're concerned about. That's what.
yeah, and that's what it would say, basically that it would be a control on the building material and limit those buildings to 144 square feet or less.
Is there a size limitation?
That's what I was throwing out, 144 square feet.
It's like a 12 by 12.
It's typical of a shed, so that's why I was thinking.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I haven't taken my shoes off.
All right, next up was
What did we
another
decide?
comment,
Yeah, we have.
What did we decide?
that we would allow for basically using that kind of metal siding that's typical to a pole barn. I'll get the actual language, it's limited, if you're using it as an exterior siding material, the size of the structure is limited to 144 square feet. Basically a shed. So you can't build a giant pole barn out of it. may need another meeting. I don't know if people wanna go till midnight. Hey, I'm here as long as you guys need me, but, so the next question that came up is really looking at, and what we've calling them traditional lots, and obviously we will get to that discussion sometime. But the issue was that these being smaller lots, currently the way that this is drafted, accessory structures are limited to 40% coverage of each yard. So 40% of your rear, 40% of your side, 40% of your front, but you really can't have anything in the front. Should this be increased for smaller lots? Or should something like just the overall building coverage control for smaller lots, what we're calling traditional lots? I will say, I've worked in communities with much smaller lots than what you got here in Palos Park, and used this standard of the 40% of each lot, of each yard, and it hasn't been an issue because it's proportional. And it's the yard, not just the setbacks, it's from the building wall to the lot line. So the question that was presented, do we need to increase this? Would this be too restrictive for smaller lots?
So I'm gonna talk here because this matters a lot to me
Okay.
and my ability to do what I need to do to my home.
Okay.
And I have one of these long, thin, traditional lots, 3/4 of an acre. The back portion of my lot, a good portion of my back lot is creek. And then it extends across the creek a little bit on the other side. So, and then there's a cliff basically down to the creek behind my house. My house is set very far back from the road. I have a garage that is a piece of garbage, I'm honest. Like, it is falling down, I won't park my cars in it, but I can't do anything with it until I know what we're doing here with the zoning codes, because right now, I would have to attach it to my house. So, once we've done this, I need to figure out how I can replace this garage. And the only place for it to go is in my backyard, and I don't have that much backyard. So if I'm going to put in a garage, even to match what I have now, I'm pretty sure I'm over 40%. I can't build my garage with this. Now, if you look at I would prefer, and there are other people that are even farther back than me, my preference on that is the overall
Building coverage.
building coverage, correct.
Which I would say is just out of my personal recommendation, you can take it or leave it. I know there's concerns of, crowding of structures on these lots. I like the building coverage approach because it's fairly simple. You get 35% building coverage of your lot, that includes your principal structure and detached accessory structures, do what you want. And it's fairly straightforward rather than regulating, we're already regulating where something can go, how big it can be and all of that. Going to a simple straight building coverage control, really just makes it kind of clean. You're not figuring out how big your side yard is or your rear yard is to get that coverage. Just as they're left out there.
So we had like two competing regulations, but this one would trump the other one.
So the proposal was, so with this one, it's 40% of each yard.
This is just the coverage of the yard.
Of
The other
the
one is
yard,
your
right,
property.
so if you're trying to put something in your side yard, it's 40% of your side yard, if you're trying to put something in the rear yard, it's 40% of that rear
Oh.
yard. So the size of that rear yard matters, whereas that might be easier, but it's the same for the traditional lots and for the 1 acre lots. And so what I would propose, what I would say is, for the traditional lots, just allow it to be that overall property coverage rule, not 40% of a specific yard, because where your house is in your yard on a traditional lot can make a huge difference in what you can do.
Does it matter if it's a traditional lot or a non-traditional lot on that? Like, do we?
Currently, no, 40% applies to one lot.
But we can change it
And
to
there was
just
some
traditional
issues.
lot would be,
Okay.
would have that different.
And today it's 40% of the main residence and any accessory structures. You add together.
That's building coverage. So building coverage,
This is just accessories.
this is just accessory structure. So this is regulating the amount of coverage of your accessory structure. So your building coverage for the district's gonna control anyway, it's gonna, and the way the language is written. Just because we're letting you have 40% of your rear yard doesn't mean you can exceed what the building coverage is. So there's an overall, there's something that sits on it, what we're trying to do is prevent
I just wanna be
yard.
able to, because I don't have much rear yard, but that's where my garage has to go, like, I just wanna, as long as I'm being responsible with what's happening on my property, I'm not changing where it is on my site, I'm very limited in my backyard.
I like the general approach,
I do too.
Just build straight building coverage.
not
Do as you
specific
will.
side.
Yeah.
And we have controls over what goes in each of these yards, so it's not like you've just given it all up to the world. I mean, you're just controlling the amount that you can have.
So is like, sorry, is a pool included in that coverage or no?
A pool is typically included in impervious surface coverage, which is a
Okay,
different control.
Okay, yeah.
That's now paving, now we're talking about sidewalks and
Yeah.
paving and, because as much as they say you can collect water in a pool, if the pool is full, the water is not going into the pool anymore.
Okay.
So pool would be impervious.
Impervious and then, yeah, okay, sorry.
These are detached accessory structures.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the consensus is, I don't know if we even need the paddles, just to go to straight building coverage to control accessory. Great, okay. So we'll do that for all. All right, awesome. Okay. Maybe these will be a little bit more low hanging.
I have a question, I'm sorry. I have a question on the accessory structures. So the, decks freestanding, can you help me understand like what that is and why it's only in the rear yard?
It's literally what you think it is, and we've
Okay.
seen these before,
Like
which is why it's in there. It's literally a platform somebody puts in the middle of their yard.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's an actual thing.
Okay.
I think it looks odd.
Yeah.
Sometimes they look very nice, but usually they look a little odd, but it's a thing.
So would a deck that's off of a pool be considered?
No,
one of these, or
this
that's-
is,
Okay,
I built a square in the middle right here.
okay.
Is it like a minimum height to be considered, is that in here? Oh, over, no. Is there like a height of what defines that? It's not like, okay, that's fine. I was.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we could put a height on it. I mean, the thing is, it's not gonna be very tall because you're trying to use it in your backyard.
Yeah, okay.
We're talking about decks.
Freestanding decks, freestanding
Yeah, I just didn't know.
platforms. They're basically freestanding platforms.
I did have a quick comment that was provided about how there's corner setbacks and interior side setbacks on the ground floor deck, but not upper floor decks. It's more in the permitted encroachments, but I guess it's just wanted to throw that comment in there since it's
Yes, and that one,
tangential to that.
the decks. That one, I took a look at that. There's an error in the way that we did it. It wasn't, they caught an error, so that's just a correction that we're gonna need to make on that one. Okay.
Sorry, I have one more. The apiary requirements. I know we've talked a lot about aesthetic and eyesores, but usually an apiary is just a white rectangle. It's like not an eyesore, I don't think. I mean, maybe the paint would chip off or something, but also in your requirements, it states that like you have to have this flyaway barrier. And I'm not an apiary expert, but I do understand that the placement of that requires sun. And again, some people don't have sun only in their rear yards. And so I'm just wondering if it's necessary to restrict that to a rear yard? Is it worth thinking about, because we already have, it's a white box surrounded by bushes so that you can almost not see it, like, is it really specifically need to be in the backyard? Is that over restricted?
That is a policy question for you all. Typically, zoning regulations stick them in the backyard because neighbors are afraid, whether true or not, of bees. And so the
Right, but
issues.
there's.
And no, and I'm just saying the reasons why, and you can change this is totally fine. But the idea is because of the flyaway barrier that's needed to get them up to that height, so that when they fly up and over the fences and everything that's there. There's no limit, I don't believe there's no limit here, about the number of boxes you can have, of hives that you can put into place. We're not limiting that, you're limited by building coverage because you're building a structure. If you would like to change that, that is a policy decision for the group.
Aren't apiaries mobile? They're not permanent structures.
They're really not.
And they're meant to be moved around, like in the wintertime, it's not gonna be here, it's not gonna be active. The apiary would be taken somewhere else, right?
It's still considered, I mean, the thing is that a shed can be moved around too if you buy a small one, I mean, so the idea of it being movable is not really gonna, that doesn't impact it. What we're talking about is where do we wanna keep these hives?
Yeah.
The way it's currently drafted, it says it's in the rear yard only. If the group would like to change that,
I've got no problem with that being changed.
to allowing them where?
In the front yard.
We already have some.
I mean, if we wanna allow them in any yard, that's also another option. But we need to make a decision, so.
It's allowed in any yard.
Okay, apiaries allowed in any yard, up for debate, agree that they can be in any yard. 1, 2, 3. Okay, even without the vote, the green has won this one. So, okay. Alright. Any more on accessory structures?
This is in the wording on the chicken coops. I wasn't really sure like what the final situation was on the B3. Is the part in red what would be the final wording?
No, the part in red is just a note to talk about what has happened. This has been brought over from, the current section 652.01. This consolidated a couple of the current standards, basically just it simplified the language, not substantively changed it, just simplified it. And then it eliminated the standards, that it has to be cleaned once every 7 days and disposed of in a clean and sanitary fashion. That's not a zoning standard, you
I
can't
was gonna say,
enforce
it's
that.
kind of a ridiculous.
So that, yeah, that's why it says it eliminated the standard as it's not zoning related, but otherwise these are kind of your current regulations.
Okay.
And I think there's a.
I have some written comments related to accessory structures, so, to your question, if there's any more comments, there is. The first two here were more, kind of minor questions that, one is there is a, requirement of a detached accessory structure with permanent foundation must be 10 feet away from the principal building. It's essentially just a question, that's the current regulation. And basically, the way it is right now, an accessory building needs to be 10 feet away from the house, so this is more or less the same regulation. There's a question about how do we define detached accessory, and it's not defined, but, I would know what it means, but just throwing that out there. And then related to the chicken coops, these were again kind of questions. Why are we limiting the amount of chickens to 5? You know, why do we need 4 square feet per chicken in the coop if the chickens are free range? We cannot prohibit chickens from being free range. And they use their coop only for sleeping and laying to protect them from predators. They know how to hide from predators, it's called survival of the fittest, and chickens are not only bred for eggs, but for their meat. To not allow this is deny a person free choice of food source. Remove limit of chickens, restriction of coop size, and number 6, harvesting the chicken for dinner. I would note, I believe more or less these regulations as proposed are in our current regulations, which limits the number of chickens in the size of the coop. Again, just reading comments. And hold on, just real quick from Teresa, accessory building and structure setback of so this is 1268(1)H, which is, okay, just a general requirement of a 15-foot setback from any lot line seems to be a lot, maybe 10 feet is a better option, and obviously if it's not located in a utility drainage easement. And then she also comments, likes the idea of limiting detached accessory structures of over 144 square feet to 2, so if they're larger structures that you're limited to 2. So those are the written comments I've received regarding those. Not sure if anybody else wants to comment on those.
I agree with the setback comment, that's just from makes sense to me to just maintain that, which is actually where my garage is now. That doesn't bother me in the side lot, I get that other people would. But so, and if I build this garage, I have to push it 15 feet out from the, which is an additional 10 feet off where the existing one is now. Makes it more visible from the street, which I don't particularly like, but it's not a hill I'm gonna die on, but I would do it on the 10 feet personally for accessory structures.
How does the group feel, taking the interior side setback, obviously, it's permitted or more restricted by this code to 10 feet from 15 as a general standard. Hands up. 1, 2. Who's having it? Structure. Okay. Regarding the other comment was if you saw the red note that we presented, there's a number of things about talking about options for controlling the amount of accessory structures. We actually just had this conversation. This was basically we're controlling them through building coverage, so nullifies that comment. Finally, on the chickens, 5 is your current limit. The minimum 4 square feet per chicken. I've seen this standard a lot. It's really to make sure there's not overcrowding of chickens. I did add the don't slaughter chickens on site provision. I'm sure it may happen every now and then. Generally, I kind of probably don't want that happening next door to you. It's not clean and neat. Sometimes it's not quiet. So, but if there's a policy difference, anything on the chickens we want to change, let me know.
No issues on that one.
Alright, so chickens stay the same. Okay. So the next section, just 2 slides on this. These are all related to parking structures. Should parking structures be prohibited, was the comment brought up. So one of the things we wanted to point out, if they're not prohibited, should any parking structure require a PUD? The way this is currently drafted, parking structures are only allowed within the western growth area as a use, and anything that happens there is already a PUD. So it's we've already gotten to this point. We've already covered it this way. We're not allowing them in other districts. So it sounds like we're okay with that? Okay. Maybe this is a low-hanging fruit, she says, dreading what's gonna happen. Should we revise the parking requirement for schools? So we received a comment that we've currently drafted it, we include classroom and we count spaces by classrooms and offices. The comment was that it would be much clearer to just do them by classroom, it's an easier number to count rather than the offices, which may or may not have people in them, it's variable. We've made the suggestion, I will continue to look at it, my recommendation would be to take the recommendation we received, create it, the parking per classroom, and just modify it that way, currently looking at things like 4 and 6. Oftentimes these are minimum standards, schools, if they can fit more parking, they'll fit more parking, for the most part, sometimes not. So I don't know if there's any really big.
This was my comment.
Okay.
I'm a PK-12 school architect.
Okay, then you
So
know.
that is why I made that comment, because I looked at it and I was like, this is kind of wacky to me, based compared to what I normally see. And because with offices, you either have a ton, like to have 3 per office, and you have the main office there, and you got 1 person in each office, and suddenly you're like, or if you're in high school, you have big shared office spaces of 20, 30 people with 3 parking spots, doesn't it? So it just seemed more straightforward to just go with this many per classroom.
Okay. I'm totally fine with that. Did not know it was your recommendation. Are we?
I have a question if we're on parking. Is this just parking structures or is this off-street parking as well?
For the prohibition on parking structures,
Well, just your slide, the section we're on.
this is the whole parking chapter.
Okay, so in the C section, it has, like the use and then the parking requirements.
Right.
Is
No, because it's completely revised with a new use structure.
Okay, so do we know what the eating and drinking establishment was before? We recently
You can
had a
give me a
discussion
moment.
about this. And I feel like we can have a lessons learned right now and figure out if that's still the appropriate number.
Yeah. I have a couple questions on this exact table.
So. Establishments for the handling, the sale and consumption on the premises of alcoholic beverages, food or refreshment, one parking space for each 230 square feet of floor area. And I think one thing to note is, a change that's made was going from like a net gross area, so this does have.
It's the
like-
whole building, we're not.
Yeah, no, exactly. What's
Yeah.
proposed is a gross floor area, to Marissa's point, you're just taking the footprint of the whole building, whereas the current code, when it comes to, that calculation, I believe, it's more of a net gross area. Floor area defined, there are things that are excluded. So, keep that, equipment rooms, stairwells, elevator shafts, other things, it's intended, so.
Cabinets, or take out your net,
This,
take out.
the recommendation is
So
footprint.
it's like where people can stand is net, and gross is just the footprint of your building.
Does that make that much of a difference? I mean, in the kitchen,
Yes.
I guess, but like,
Yeah, it's probably, yeah, 10-15%.
I think a lot of the questions that came up in that meeting is like, how many people is this designed to hold?
Right.
And is that useful? I mean, I know these are how you guys normally do this,
Yeah,
but.
that's like, when you get to the occupancy, that's a fire code thing, and, I mean, that is, the determination with the fire code is, let's just use this room as an example. How many people can you fit in this room that can get out of the room in a safe, relatively quick manner before they burn? Or some kind of emergency? No, seriously, it kind of is that, and I've, if you start, in certain places that I've been, I've looked, and, I've, in my church in various spaces, there's even 3 different occupancies posted, because it's like if you use the room standing room only versus chairs only versus tables and chairs, so
So
the
that
fire
does
marshal's saying there's
complicate
different
Yeah.
occupancy levels there, so how would you regulate that from a zoning perspective, because you're allowing for changes, which you're building a permanent parking lot though, so, just
So
note
they
that
took
the
this
occupancy per fire code is kind of a different thing that you're looking at.
But if we took this number, I mean, maybe I can do this offline, but I would be interested to see how it shakes out in.
But they wouldn't have required it.
Yeah,
they did it
I
this
do.
way.
I kind of like, I feel like we should probably learn that lesson.
Okay, so I'm gonna walk into the lion's den on this one, because everybody's aware of the issues of parking at the PIC, Islamic Center.
Okay.
So here it says place of worship, that the recommendation is there's one parking place per 300 square feet in that building. And we know that the occupancy of that building is 730, I think. So this formula is going to result in a very underestimated number, or the end result is way too few parking places. This is like not the right unit of measure, or we need to restrict the number of people that can be in that building. Because this is gonna result, we do have a big parking problem at that building, right? So if you do this math, this is gonna say you need some small number of parking places, which I know you say that occupancy is something different, but it's very related.
But, so I think where you would go with that is that you would make a much smaller square foot per, per parking spot for the congregational area, as opposed to, because you could have, a lot of office area, that would maybe be where that 300 makes more sense. But really what matters is how many people you're fitting in, and that is an assembly occupancy where you've got, like 7 square foot per person if you're doing the building code. So you are like fitting a lot of people into that worship area, and that really, what you can fit in there makes a difference in how many parking spots you can fit in.
And that, the way the occupants come and go is totally different than a
Right.
restaurant, right? It's
Right.
like, it's all and then it's mostly not. So you have to like design for max capacity because that's what.
So what I'm saying is I don't think this is the right unit of measure.
Okay.
It might be as small as 50 per, but and
It
it's
might,
50
then you
per
gotta say, is
square
that,
foot in the worship hall.
but then is that reasonable?
Well, you have like this live performance venue one, it has one per 4 persons based on maximum occupancy. Seems reasonable.
Because it's easier in a performance venue to determine that.
This kind of is a performance
This is a
venue.
performance venue, indeed.
I mean, if you want to, I think to one of the points, the perfect example that Mark brought up, it depends on how the congregate area is set up. So, we don't wanna work with it, cause it could be chairs, it could be prayer mats, it could be something, we don't know what that occupancy would be based on how it's set up. So if we wanna say that it's, 1 per 300 on office and, private areas, like a better word, but, if there's a kitchen, there's not 100 people in the kitchen, there's 5 people in the kitchen cooking. And then to say for areas that the actual congregation areas, we could do something like 1 per 10, or even, I think most of the time, it's kind of like looking at something, do
Is
the
this gonna-
congregate area, now, how many other places, because the one thing I don't wanna do is, being cautious about this, there's other churches in
Yes.
town. So if we get really strict with this, because these are just the minimums, I don't wanna throw them in a non-conforming status if we can avoid it.
They have a lot of parking.
They have a lot of parking.
They have a parking lot across the street, but I would think, you've got your circulation aisles, which is probably about 10% of your space. So, and then you've got people like just
Right.
sitting in pews, and if it's maxed out, it might be, 20 feet per person.
Is this change gonna affect their ability to even create more parking there, or are we going to be able to foist more parking upon them?
No, they
I don't think
exist.
so, right?
What
Like, it's-
exists exists,
Yeah,
it's
so
not gonna
that's-
change anything.
Yeah, and
If they
this
built
is
an-
probably not the
if-
venue then
if
for
they
further
built an
discussion on this
addition.
policy issue, because there's really no way for us to immediately impact it.
But this
Sad.
unit of
They expand their
measure
buildings.
results in such few number of parking places, it becomes meaningless. Because they're parking in so many different places that it aren't the parking lot, because the parking lot is overflowing.
Oh, I
So
know,
this is
but-
the wrong unit
Build
of measure
addition,
in here, you're
they
gonna
would
say
have
this,
to
and then you're not
use
gonna
that.
force them to abide by it.
But this would only be applicable to a church that's going to do one today, a new
Or
church.
if they build an addition.
Or if they build an addition, and if that's the case, then.
Which they will want to, and I'm sure that there, oh, and then there's also a community center here too. You look at how that one's gonna be, how parking will be assumed with that based on how many people will be in there or based on square foot. Because what's happening at Hobnobs, this would apply to, because that is not yet, I don't believe, an operational structure.
What is
So
the
that-
place?
Oh, it's a,
It's the office building on the right-hand side of the road, going east on 123rd, you can't miss it, it's right across from.
hospital.
Oh,
Used to be a restaurant.
it used to be called
okay,
Hobnobs.
okay.
I really think that based on the issues that we've had, since this has been affected with larger structures, that the parking needs to be based on the building occupancy for the fire code. I think that they need to provide enough parking, if their capacity is 800, divided by 3. And that's how many parking spots they need, assuming that there's 3 people in each vehicle, because if that was the case, it's consistent, it's a mathematical number, say, okay, your capacity is 750, you need to have 250 parking spaces, problem solved. Because I'm not even anywhere near the Islamic Center, and I haven't really seen issues with Wu's house with the parking, just because of my schedule, but I know for a fact it's caused a lot of grief in the village. And I think if you base it on an occupancy, you're not gonna have a problem.
Yeah,
And is there a number that churches use?
I don't design churches, so I don't know that going to schools, but at the same, yes, there's generally typical, but it's assembly.
And it varies typically, you can see everything from one, it's done on square footage because everybody over time has moved away from occupancy for a lot of the reasons we discussed. Doesn't mean you can't use it, that's not a thing, but most places have moved away from it because there's games that can be played with that occupancy. Well, which one are you gonna use? And I got this, and is it, anyway. So they've moved to things like, you can lower this number. You can go to 1 per 100 square feet, 1 per 50 square feet. Basically places are moving towards using when they're keeping parking requirements, towards using a set physical number. We could use occupancy if we want to. There's nothing that prohibits that.
I would agree with what she's saying, and where like if you look at this room though, this is kind of similar to what if you had a small church, the kind of space that people would have. You might fit in tighter in here, but you look at how much, okay, if this room is filled, there's probably about 20 square feet per person. That's because you're not gonna fill it. I mean, if you're filling it so much that people can't walk and don't have circulation, then you have fire code issues, that's different. But, so that's way different than 300 square feet per person, So you might have, but I do like, okay, if you have accessory spaces, you still have to accommodate for, and that's bigger, 300, for an office or something like that in circulation. But if you have the assembly area, and that's what I think we're missing, is that when you look at the whole building, and maybe you don't have any offices, and you just have, assembly structure, then you're like nowhere near enough parking.
Well, I just, it seems to me, and, that's why relying on your expertise here, I go to church, a big church, and we have lots of parking, but we have lots of people. And it seems to me, parking for a church, we're just talking about churches, should be based on essentially attendance, if you will, the worship area, because all the rest of it's just accessory stuff, kids' rooms and all, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But what you're really concerned about, kids don't ride, they
Yeah.
come with their parents, and their parents are in the sanctuary.
I think that's what you're saying, it's kind of where we're going,
It's
office,
essentially-
working areas, kids' playroom, 1 per 300 square feet.
Or if he's saying, who cares? That's.
But for the congregate area, the place of assembly, which is
Right.
where people will come for service, that would be something like 1 per 20 square feet, which is about a person. And if you think about that,
If
we're
that's
used-
the number, let's use that number.
Yeah, I think that's right, because when you look at like a table, a 4-top table, that's about 60 square feet, basically when you lay that out. So yeah, if you're looking at a church, you're looking at about 20 square foot a person. Now, the thing is, if the church gets really popular, there's nothing we can do. You're never gonna have enough parking. That's just, it's Trader Joe's, the Trader Joe's situation. You'll just never have enough parking for them. But I think going to an objective standard like that would work for something like that. And that's a lot of parking. If you take a congregate area and say it's 1 per 20 square feet, it's basically taking that whole area and saying, it's a person in every 5x4 cube.
My point about bringing this and basing it on the occupancy per fire code is if you have it based on the fire code, and they're supposed to have that many parking spots to count it, and you have a situation like you have at the Pelzic Monument Center, or a situation you had at Hughes, and you already know they're supposed to have enough parking for everyone in the fire code, and you've got people parking everywhere. The police have means to go in there saying this is clearly a violation of the fire code, and have an actionable method that way, because that seems to be what the problem is. The place is overpacked. I have to believe what I've seen online with my neighbors that are complaining about it and what was happening. They have way too many people in the building to safely evacuate it. I tried to take a class when I was at UIC. They needed to wait for one person. The room occupancy was 32. I would have been 33. And the dean said, can't do it till someone drops the class. So this is an enforcement mechanism in addition to the fact that if they're held to the standard, they will have to provide more parking. That's why I say you need to go based on the occupancy.
But the occupancy issue, zoning won't solve an overcrowded facility. There's no zoning powers in that. You would just be using that number to create parking spaces.
Exactly. And if you're supposed to have parking for everyone that's in there, and
Well,
you
you
have twice as many cars there, anyone can see, hey, this parking lot should have enough parking for everyone that's in that building, and they're parked all over, there's 3 times as many cars. That is clear probable cause for the police to come out and say, hey, you have too many people in this building. You've never seen a bar where you think there's too many people in here? Or you've tried to go in a nightclub?
Well, yeah, no, but usually it's other issues that get the fire department involved and get the kind of, you have to get out of here, there's too many people. The cars on the street can't be verified. They probably are, but it cannot be verified that these cars are all going to this place of worship. And that's what's and that's your cause for it being overcrowded. Somebody would have to, I mean, it's too, zoning can't address that aspect of it.
And I would say with the Islamic Center, what I've noticed is when they have that kind of over, like all that, the parking issues, the police are directing traffic for people crossing the street, so they know about it.
Oh, yeah.
But they don't have a mechanism to do anything.
But if they know
about
that
it.
they have to be directing traffic for people to get across the street,
But
they know there's so many people.
They don't
I
know
think
that
it's-
the parking has exceeded the fire code.
But they do know that there's a lot of people in the building, which is what you're saying with the parking. I think she's right that you can just do a posted occupant load and then I don't need as many parking spots because I posted my occupant load at 50. There's ways to get around it that then what do you do?
And it happens.
They're saying this and then
And the
they.
fire
That's
marshal shows up a couple of
enforceable.
times.
Right,
Yeah, the
fire
fire
marshal shows
marshal-
up and says, you have more than 50 in this building.
But the issue is we're kind of convoluting two things. The fire department's not gonna enforce the amount of parking. If we say the occupancy is 50 and you need 50 parking spaces, the fire department doesn't care about your parking spaces.
I'm looking at
And they can't
probable
enforce
cause for police or a fire department.
I mean,
And
I
if
would
you
be,
have
I
that-
would be cautious about bringing this into zoning. I mean, we're looking at is a use happens, it has a high parking demand, what should we set as a minimum standard? If something is overcrowded and it causes parking issues, that's two separate things. You know, so we wanna be careful here, and we also wanna, you never wanna set a parking standard so severely to deal with an issue that's of something that's already in place. If they're gonna expand, then they're gonna have to deal with that with a higher parking standard. But what's there now is that's there now.
But there's another building going in, and we don't want the problem to be enhanced even further when the new building becomes operational.
So the new building would then, if you're adding on an addition, you've gotta cover that amount of area with parking. So basically what that addition is would be your new parking standard. It's not gonna solve the whole
The new
parking
parking standard, whatever that might turn
Yeah,
out
but
to
it's
be.
not gonna be for the whole building, it's for the addition. Because the building's there. If they tore everything down and started fresh, whole different scenario. But their building exists and their parking's there, so if they're gonna build a 10,000 square foot addition, that 10,000 square foot addition is subject to the parking standard.
It's an existing building that they're changing the use of, they bought it and they're redoing it for another purpose. So
But it's
I don't know if
addition
it's
to
that,
their
does
campus.
it have an occupancy yet in that
It-
building?
Just to clarify, the village is not authorized anything for any type of assembly use at that building.
Okay.
It's for offices.
So if you set it at one parking place for 4 square feet, you're gonna need a lot more.
So really, if they do it in addition, because I just.
There's no, on their, on the
And
PIC's,
usually when I do a code study, in a zoning study, and if we apply for a special use application for renovation of the school, I have to prove that there's sufficient parking for the building.
Well, it
With the
depends, so if you're changing the
you know.
use, yeah.
No, like
But if
I
I'm
did
just
addition,
expanding my
added
existing
classrooms, and I have to show them what's the total parking requirement for the building in the new condition. And I have to make sure that the parking lot is sufficient for the new use of the building.
I mean, typically, it's really just looking at what that addition increases the amount of parking, it expands the parking lot, because you're looking at the existing condition that's there should typically be considered,
Can we indicate that if an existing non-conforming use, if there was an addition onto that building, that the parking for the entire structure has to be brought up to meet current zoning requirements?
Absolutely. Why not?
I mean, you could, but, you would have to look at that, because I'm not sure how that would play into an existing non-conforming condition. The other part of that is basically going to be, you could demand that somebody make more parking on the basis of the whole, of a building with an addition, but it doesn't create more land to create the parking. You're gonna see it as a variance, I mean, that's just gonna come back each and every time. You know, even quite frankly, doing with the addition expansion, you might see a bunch of it as a variance.
But if it's becoming a traffic problem and a parking problem, the variance will in all likelihood will not get approved.
Well, yeah, well, there's criteria there, but you also have to be kind of mindful of the others about, you know, kind of the existing situation that's on the site.
Yeah, why would we grant a variance when there's already existing parking
I mean,
problems? I wouldn't vote for one. I voted yes on just about every.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have.
Well, it seems to me that's a very deep subject.
Yeah, and Arista,
So
we
we're
can't
on
be,
schools.
we do need to keep in mind that we can't overly burden a religious use, in a manner that we wouldn't necessarily require with some other assembly.
Right,
There's federal and
to
state laws
jump on
related to
that.
that. So, to further Phil's point, that does get a little deeper as well, so, I mean, this might be something of just, you know, I assume we might have some follow-up discussions where there's some suggestions that are made, some examples, some further information.
Yeah,
Just one-
that's where I was gonna go next, because if we're gonna do anything to this type of assembly use, we need to look through the other assembly uses in the chart and kind of make sure that they align and that others aren't overly burdened because of the rules.
Overly burdened, but also making sure that the resulting formula or the resulting calculation, the end result, is a reasonable result. Because that's not what happened with the center. The
Okay.
result was woefully underestimated. So we don't want that to happen going forward. And I go back to the units of measure used here. Whatever it is, you want it to be a sensible answer. One that makes sense and doesn't say under the, you go, well, it's not really the right number of parking places, but we're just gonna go with it because it's equal to everybody else. It needs to be a sensible answer.
Well, I mean, it does need to be kind of balanced with everybody else that has an assembly use per federal statute, so there's no way around that. The feds came down with that years ago under RLUIPA.
No, and I think we're okay, we're in agreement, anything that's.
Oh, yeah, no,
we wanna make
anything
sure that
that's-
there's sufficient parking for it.
But I just don't wanna get to the point where we've dropped things down way too low and other things are out of whack then, when you have other types of assembly. I mean, there can be a little bit of difference understanding kind of, the patterns are different, something may be open all day long, whereas this is kind of doing things. Also, just to be mindful, sometimes these issues are not so much based on the formula we get, it's how popular the place becomes that exacerbates parking issues a lot of the time. So, not taking this particular use into account, but kind of other places, we wanna be sure that we're not creating kind of these seas of parking that are unused.
Well,
Like
they
occupancy
can
can
also
be a limiter.
say that they can, I mean, you could even, I guess, require that a certain amount be permeable pavers that isn't, I mean, it's more expensive, I'm gonna do that in a number of ways, but it's,
I mean, the permission, in the current draft, we've written in those permissions,
Yeah.
so. Okay. Oh, these are not gonna be easy, okay, it is 9 o'clock. I'm fine, how is everybody else? You can use the pass.
I don't wanna do this a million times, I'm good,
Keep going? We're good.
I could stay till 9:30. I start work at 6 in the morning.
Okay,
I think
fair
maybe
enough.
at the very least, it might make sense to like get through the parking or whatever.
That's
you know,
my
At least get through it thematically in the section.
So in the parking, the first one here, we talk about a parking lot setback along a lot line. Now, we've got landscape requirements along the street, we've got buffer yard requirements when things are abutting. This is kind of in addition to that, those larger buffers, those larger perimeter setbacks would control over these, those have very specific planting requirements. This current 5-foot setback The way it's currently drafted encourages landscape, it doesn't make it a requirement, and as a comment we received said, if it's not required, people don't need to do it. Very good point. So basically, because it is a small 5-foot setback, and if you had a buffer that takes over in place of this is really just almost where you have a parking lot abutting a parking lot. That the requirement be revised to, our recommendation is to revise it to require live ground cover in this area. Not get specific, no trees, 5 feet's a little small for trees, no shrubs, but just live ground cover, just something to make it green and forest. Seems okay? Okay, alright, that was easy.
If I may, with my written comments, I don't think they're too complicated, but specifically with that, there was a comment about having a 5-foot setback. Does that seem too small? And I do know, again, there are situations where there's buffer yards and such that go into play as well.
Yeah, it's 5 feet, basically you're in situations where it's 5 feet of parking lot against parking lot, not against residential, you've got a much bigger buffer against the street, you've got a whole big planting area. To me, this seems very reasonable, a 5-foot area.
I would say as long as there's wheel stops there and you're not extending your vehicle right up to the curb
Yes.
line.
Yeah, that's part of the parking lot design, so, yes.
If I may then, before we get to the
I know you see it coming too.
That, yes. Real quickly, and I sent this one to you, there was a comment just about like a section that referenced a section that referenced
Yes,
a
I
different
can,
section,
yes.
so that's
Yes,
noted. And then here, just with the parking lot surfacing, which is 1269-4C, there was a comment about crushed stone should not be an option for open off-street parking areas. They should be concrete or asphalt. I do believe you are limiting gravel, but just throwing the comment out there. I think most would agree that we don't want crushed stone surfacing.
Yeah, and to say as part of that, there's a whole language in there that allows for permeable paving. So basically it's just saying gravel, and this additional comment, which I agree with, crushed stone would not be considered permeable. We want stuff that doesn't go in the sewer.
And then I do have a written comment related to the next item, but I'll maybe hold it until everyone.
So I'll give the question, you can give the comment, and then we can dive into it. So there's currently, the way that the ordinance is drafted, if I own a commercial vehicle, it's my personal vehicle, say I own a landscaping company, I have a pickup, and my logo is on the side of my truck, so it's both my commercial vehicle and my personal vehicle. The current requirement, which I believe is similar to kind of what's sort of in place now, is that it can only be parked in the garage. I cannot park it in my driveway for others around me to see. Carried over what was in the kind of current practice, but so the comments that came in is, can we allow for them to be, if it's my personal vehicle, and I'm not talking about a semi-truck, I'm talking about pickups, small SUVs, things like that. You know, if you're doing a semi-trailer or anything like that, that's not what we're talking about. We received 2 comments, I believe.
So yeah, this comment here, I don't believe it's elitist or discriminatory to prohibit work trucks with company logos to be parked in people's driveways, etc. So it protects Village of Palos Park residents and their guests from being inundated with free advertising on what can be, what sometimes be scrappy looking vehicles. The code does not prohibit you from parking the vehicle in the garage. I actually don't think that I had another comment related to that.
I'm sorry, I probably screwed you up. The reason this one's in the presentation was we got it in the last set of written comments that you read in, so that's okay, there we go. So, kind of a back and forth here, policy issue. Throw it out to everyone.
So I brought this up because my husband is the regional manager for a company and he has a work vehicle. The company he works for is based out of New Jersey. He has a work truck. It's a white pickup, not even a big pickup truck, it's a white pickup truck. But it says the name of his company on the side. It's very discreet. It has some information on the back of it. He has no option to not have that vehicle at our home. I've mentioned earlier the issues I have in my garage. You've mentioned that most people don't park with cars in their garages, that It is not an eyesore, and there are my husband is not like a unique condition. There are a lot of people in the service industry that they need to do this for. We should not be determining who is allowed to live here based on what type of vehicle your job requires you to have. And he parks it behind our deck. I have a space in between that garage and the deck, and he parks it back there. Sometimes it's parked in the driveway where you can see it from the road. Obviously, anything that's got like light up signs on it and things like that, or big vehicles, I get. But if this gets enacted, my family is never going to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance. I'm a member of the planning commission unless I move out. I mean, I guess eventually in a few years when I build the garage, he would have to park it. I get that, but I think that I'm sorry, I do think it's discriminatory. It's saying we don't want people that work in the service industry. If you work in the service industry, you better hide it from everybody else. And I won't vote to approve anything that has that language in there. That's how I feel about this.
I think saying that this provision is discriminatory is hyperbolic, frankly. Like, because we're in a residential area, and I don't think that, like, you're necessarily, like, your husband's intentions are, in any way, like, not good. But it's for, again, the bad actors, the people who have larger, fancier, flashier things in a commercial nature that they're parking at their residential house.
I mean, I think to be clear, the way this regulation is written, when there isn't a control like the one you have now, we're talking about standard passenger vehicles that folks own that just have a logo on the side. So, it's a pickup truck, it's a Ford F-150, it's, a standard size van that if it didn't have the logo is perfectly fine. So we're not saying that you can come and park giant vehicles that are commercial vehicles that, are there. We're talking, the discussion on this is things that you would drive as a normal, it's not your work car, it's just be a normal car you bought off the lot. They would then have a logo on it. Just to be very clear on this.
Well, how does a truck look that would not fit the building?
Yeah, I feel
How
like
does
a lot
what?
of people read this and interpreted it this way.
That what? No, that's what I'm saying. No, you're correct. Allison's correct. That's what it says right now. What I'm trying to clarify is what the permission would be is to allow somebody who owns a standard size pickup truck with the logo of their landscaping business to park outside.
Easy.
It currently doesn't allow that. Currently you gotta put it in your garage.
Vehicle must have either regular passenger plates or B truck plates. Anything over, it's based on the gross weight of the vehicle. If it's over that weight, then it's not gonna fit into that category.
But the issue is, and I get what you're saying, and it's kind of how you make this distinction between it being a regular family car and, an actual like heavy duty thing. The issue that's happening here is the logo on the side.
And if it has B truck plates on it, then you can park it in your driveway whether it has a logo or not.
Well, that is the question. Right now, the way it's written with the logo, you cannot park it on your driveway. Gotta bring it inside.
I lived at Oak Hills in the golf course over there for years. I drove a Yukon, the logo this big on each of the passenger windows, which permitted me to drive onto certain federal job sites. And have a marked vehicle, had regular passenger plates, it was owned by myself, not by my business. I got fined every night by Oak Hills for having it. It was awful. So I'm gonna side with Allison.
I said with Allison as well.
When we talked about this last time, I think the concern was these large dump trucks being parked in front of people's houses, right? And that's
Like a dump truck?
like a dump truck.
You cannot park construction equipment in front of your house.
Well,
Every day.
it happens back there with great frequency, we were told last time. So, to be clear, I think that needs to not be possible,
No, and that is not what I'm advocating for. I'm saying usually what's typical is it's like I was saying, it's the F-150, the Yukon, the pickup truck. Quite frankly, some people have sedans with the name of a business across the side. You see them on the highways when they're doing surveys on the roadways. That's what we're talking about. Basically, it's a car I could buy at a car dealership and I would bring home, and if it didn't have the logo, nobody would care.
Wait, can you just say which specific section? Like, I
Yeah.
just feel like the wording is gonna
It's
be.
1269-7A.
It's page 1269-8.
So other than height, I mean, I'm trying to find out why that couldn't be put into a garage. I mean, if the vehicle is too tall to be put into a garage, I could understand, but if the vehicle could be put in a garage, that would be one way around whatever they're trying to do.
Well, you're allowed, right now, if you have the logo on, you have to go in the garage.
Correct.
The issue is, I buy a standard pickup truck, why can I park it if it doesn't have a logo in my driveway? But if I have a logo on it from my company, why does it have to go inside the garage? Why can't I park that exact same truck on the driveway? That's the issue.
You know, my house is on a hill, and so if I had, in my neighborhood, if you turned in like Partridge Lane, my house, as you can see, it plain as day. If I had a business and I had a side panel truck, I would love to park it up there. But I would imagine my neighbors being pretty upset, because it's basically like having a billboard on my property when it's not there. So is that explicitly what we're trying to, you know, something like that, that's got a giant, you know, maybe 10 by 15 panel on it, like, I mean, a logo on the side of a pickup truck. Come on, that's ridiculous, let's
But
let that happen.
I mean, I
But
can
like
see
a
if it's like
giant
a
panel
bright
van.
neon pink vehicle, okay, and there may be some companies that are like that, but you can't really go there though, right? You can't really.
Yeah, you really can't jump into
A lot of
controlling the
stuff
color.
that's-
Do not jump into controlling the color of cars.
Yeah.
You cannot do that. You're gonna aggravate Mary Kay ladies, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, so I just, yeah, I mean, I think
So
it's,
the egregious example is that panel van, you know, that's basically got a 15 by 10 kind of billboard on it. Can we allow the pickup trucks with logos on them that have a maybe 20 inches by 20 inches, or whatever the measurement is? That's fine, but you can't park a panel van outside that's got a gigantic advertisement in front of it. That seems to me to be
Well,
pretty
I
legit.
think there's some, there's some issues there too, is not really, we can look at kind of, I can look into panel vans and giant signs on that. The thing is I don't wanna put any dimensions on any kind of logos on a car. You can't send code enforcement out there to be like, okay, well, you're here, but you're 2 inches over what we allow you to have, and so now you're in violation, and you get the ticket.
More like a suggestion about the classification of the plates.
Yeah, I mean, that would play into it. I mean, I think conceptually we can work that out, but and to Mike's point, he's exactly right. What we're talking about is regular vehicles that people would drive. And we'll use that as part of the definition to say, even if you have these vehicles and they have a logo, they're okay to park on your driveway. The vehicle, it's easy enough. Here's the thing. It's easy enough to define which vehicles you would like to allow that are standard passenger size vehicles. And quite frankly, Ford F-150s, or 250, whatever the hell they become now, are much bigger, but they're still just a car I could buy at the Ford dealership. I could buy it at a car dealership and I can park it in my driveway. What we're talking about are those cars, and can I put my logo on there? Or if my work gives me a car and it's that car, can I put my logo on it and park it in my driveway? That's the crux of this, is the logo on the vehicle. We're not telling you you can park a dump truck. I don't want anybody parking a dump truck. That's not even safe. It's standard passenger vehicles, as you pointed out, kind of those plates that are like that.
can we indicate that they must be parked in the rear yard, you know, like I said, my HUD, if you've got so it can't be visible from the street, it must be, we say that for RVs, right, or recreational vehicles. Can it be that same sort of thing, that if it's beyond a passenger truck or passenger vehicle, that it would have the same requirements as we would have for an RV?
I mean, do you want to allow heavy?
No, I'm thinking a panel van that might also still be something that someone would have. We don't want it to be an advertisement, but that is fairly common. Anything over the size of a panel van is probably something we don't want people parking.
So it's not
Are you saying
recreational
you
vehicle if we found that to count as.
Well, the same kind of, like, we've made an accommodation for someone to, we don't wanna see your motorhome parked on the street.
Right.
It's on the side of the garage.
It would have the same parking requirements as a motorhome.
I mean, if
It's
there's,
out of sight.
if this panel van, I've worked in a lot of communities, and this has never become an issue for anybody. I mean, people are pretty reasonable in terms of what they use as their commercial vehicles that are for personal use as well. You know, if they exceed something, I can take a look a little bit at panel vans. It seems to be this is kind of the one sticking point that's past things. And say, yes, you could park that, but you have to park it behind the front building line, either kind of to the side, to the rear of your yard, or even just in your rear
So
yard.
like, if they don't have a driveway, they have to still like drive on the grass and park it behind their house?
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's the issue.
And you think that's
I don't like that.
It doesn't really make sense. I just feel like this logo thing is not a big deal, because everybody already parks them in there.
I mean, the thing is I could buy a car, and I could say that I am advocating for something, and wrap the car with some of the most obnoxious stuff, and that is my freedom of expression for my car.
So
The
that has
logo
nothing
is
to do
irrelevant.
with-
I can do whatever I want to my own personal vehicle. If I want to say I love Wendy's and I eat Wendy's every day, and I'm not working for Wendy's and I'm not advertising Wendy's. I don't know why I always go to Wendy's for an example. I love Taco Bell. I do love Taco Bell, and I put that on my car, and that's me expressing my own personal. I don't work for them. I don't do anything for them. It's me, my personal expression. Because if I put their logo, they would likely sue me. That you can't stop me. You know, I wrap my support for, you know, some issue or some candidate or for just something all over my car. You can't stop me from doing that. So the issue of the logo is,
Well, my friend of mine is a Illinois state trooper. He has a take-home car. It's his work vehicle, and if he lived in Palos Park, would they ticket him for having a vehicle, his work vehicle with a logo in it?
yep, yep.
I don't think that would end well.
I don't think so either. I mean, the issue to think about, what is this solving? What is the idea of requiring them to park in a garage? Solving.
It sounds to me like I don't think many of us have too much of
No.
Yeah, we didn't ask this.
But
Let's vote on it and see where we're at. So basically, the vote is, should we allow residents to park their commercial vehicles that are all standard passenger size vehicles that'll be part of the language, to park their cars with their logo in their driveway?
and we're gonna use some sort of GVW over there or something like that,
Oh,
like.
I'm sorry, what are we?
Let people with the logo park in their driveway. With the logo, letting them park in their driveway with the logo. Passenger size vehicles only. Okay.
So that's like a max Ford Transit size vehicle.
Yeah, we'll work it out. Michael has a good idea looking at the plates and all that, but basically if I can buy a car dealership, I should be able to park it. So.
And we'd also need to take the personal off of there, just for the record, right?
Take what?
Because, you know, as we've learned tonight, you know, Allison's husband doesn't own that vehicle, so it's not a personal vehicle, so you don't wanna have a requirement for it to be a person's personal commercial vehicle.
No, and when I say that, I don't mean, you get it, I have a work car, my work owns it, I use it for personal use, so.
Vehicle under the control of the resident.
Yeah, yes. I know we said, is there any other parking comments in there? So we have one comment on signs, and I think we can do it, because you said y'all could go, like what you said, 9:30.
I do have some written comments about signage though,
Okay, what's
so.
Some what?
Section?
Written comments about
Oh,
signage.
there were a few of those. Okay, I don't think we're gonna get through them.
Just 270.
Okay, I think we need to, there's a bunch of there's a few comments on signs. The one that you see up here is kind of the easiest one of.
How many more categories we have to go, just out of curiosity?
Signs, uses, so there's one slide on signs, plus some written comments, one slide on uses, there's some written comments, but they overlap with the use slide. Design standards, residential dimensional standards, and then the traditional lot discussion.
Which could be its own meeting itself.
What?
Could be its own meeting.
It probably likely will be its
Well,
own meeting.
yeah, I mean, we'll just kinda, you know, move along, we'll have a meeting
dogs. We'll listen. It's not, we wore you out. Okay.
We'll need a motion in a second, and wait for it. We'll need a motion in a second.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
You can keep those, I'll bring new ones the next time, so you
Oh,
can take them home and have.
What?
them.
You
I'll do
can
that.
change them.